Thank you for joining us today. We have Chris Valenti here with us speaking about survival of the fittest, and he's going to give us an honest look at what it takes to successfully run a small shop. Chris, thank you for joining us. Did you want to give a little information about yourself, your company, and what you wanted to accomplish today?
Sure. Thank you for having us, Amanda. So my name is Chris Valenti. I'm owner of CK Valenti Designs in Chandler, Arizona. We are a general contractor and specialty fabricator. Our focus is high-end commercial work, including museums, aquariums, and other commercial spaces, while still maintaining a small presence in the residential world. This presentation is about some of the methods, practices we've used in the past 16 years to keep our business running and now thriving. Some may think it's been too much or maybe not enough. It just depends on your situation, but I hope some of this content will be helpful for you.
Thank you, Chris. And that picture on screen is a picture from your contest or your program you do every year to get kids involved in the industry. You want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's our yearly breakout of the box event. Several years ago, we're all experiencing the work issues and skilled tradespeople. So I started the breakout event to try to get 6th to 8th graders introduced to working with their hands. It's a totally free event. It happens every year in November. We have some pretty good sponsors every year. It's up to anywhere between like 35 and 45 kids. Last year was our virtual session due to COVID and everything. This year we're having it again. We're hoping to do it on site, but it's TBD right now. But it's, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household where my father was a union carpenter. So working with our hands, my brother, my sister, it all kind of came second nature, but that is not the case today, especially with schools eliminating shop programs. So it's just to get them introduced to the trades, working with their hands, and hopefully they might want to take it a step further after the event.
Okay, well, yes, the work you did with the young kids is really important. And I think it also not only instilling the need for them in getting involved in the industry earlier, it's almost a personality trait, would you say, to succeed in this industry?
Exactly. You definitely have to have the wiring for it. And if you're not getting introduced to it in your school and no one in your family is involved in it, then the odds of you getting introduced to it at all is very limited. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to just, take a very short period of time and introduce these kids to working with their hands. Some may like it, some may not, but it's just a decision we made in an effort to combat our complaining with the lack of the workforce. We figured we just need to do something about it, and hopefully we can get other shops on board with it. When the sponsors are in place, and they are now, it really isn't a large cost to our company. It's very helpful with the sponsors. So it is something feasible, and the budgets are not very expensive.
That's great. So one of those personality traits you and I have talked about is hustle, and that's necessary as an entrepreneur and as a small business owner. Did you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I really don't hear anybody talking about hustle, and I think it's key to many industries. It seems like so many things are relative these days. So one person's hustle is another person's slow speed, or vice versa. But I think you have to have it. Working hard is a lot of effort, but it's not enough. It has to be combined with working smart, always having that sense of urgency. So this doesn't mean that you have to run around the shop or the job site like your hair is on fire. It's just more of, knowing that things have to get done. We have to meet certain goals each day. When we interview potential employees, I simply ask them, I say, do you have hustle? And, on an interview, a lot of times you're going to get what you want to hear, and I understand that. But I look more for the reactions to the questions and see if it kind of catches them off guard, or see the facial expression when you ask a question like that. Some interviews, they get it and some don't. And that's kind of a good telltale sign. So, how to hustle for me is, working nights. Don't want to do it, but sometimes you have to. I think I've always dreaded working Sunday nights. And I think, for everybody, Sunday nights is kind of your reset, right? For the week coming up. So if you're working Sunday night because maybe something messed up in the shop or whatever the case may be, you're definitely putting the hustle in. And there's some people that simply say, I will never work a Sunday night. And I get it. That's their prerogative. But as a small business owner, sometimes you don't have that choice. So, a little more on this. I race cars, and they always say, focus your eyes on where you want to go with the race car, not where it currently is. And, I apply that to business as much as I can, because if you don't focus on where you're going, then you kind of get stuck in that day to day. And I think everybody can relate to that. And this could be on the short term. It could be on the long term. It applies to both. If you're in your shop, what are your next 2 to 3 steps, right? You sometimes you have those employees where, they finish one task and they don't know where they're going after that because they weren't thinking about it. We watch our employees, and, some of them, one after another, they're just knocking it out. And others, you could tell, when they're walking from one end to the shop to the other, putting stuff over here and, moving that same thing to another spot, they're kind of lost. So it's always good to have those 2, 3 steps ahead, just thinking about them. Also, we see sometimes employees are distracting other coworkers because they're done with their task. There's plenty of work right now, so there's really no reason for that. So that's part of that's what hustle is for me. Also, sometimes opportunities fall in your lap and sometimes they don't. You have to push hard for those opportunities, whether it be on the sales side, whether it be meeting with new people. One day you're in the shop, the next day you're out meeting people. You're switching gears all the time. That's the hustle, keeping that up. And you have to balance it with your personal life. We can get burnt out real quick. I've been there. I still get there sometimes now. And you got to know when to push back a little. So it's always a juggling act. Some people do it better than others. I think I've been doing okay with it. I think the past year and a half, though, it's kind of peaking, with everything going on in the economy.
I think that's a common issue a lot of the CMA members are having right now is the burnout, just because they've all been working like they're running out of time, like you suggest here, because you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And there's still a lot of opportunity out there. And I think maybe there's even more now because, we've lost some shops. The workforce is not at capacity where it should be. So, I always think, man, I could have so much more work, but at the same time, where's that cutoff where you're not overworking your team, you're not overworking yourself, you're not overworking your family, because we've been in those situations, right? In 2007, 2008, where we're waiting for the phone to ring. Mm-hmm. And, so when you see an abundance of work, you want to grab it as much as possible. And, you have to hustle to get it done, but you also have to be able to deliver. And if you can't deliver, we all know then it's worse than just turning down the work to begin with. So I don't know. I think with today's generation, that hustle, it's not there like many of us are used to. And I think we need to talk about it more. We just, I don't know if hustle's too much of a crude word. You don't hear people saying it, but that's how I look at it. And I mean hustle in the good terms, not necessarily the bad terms, but that's kind of how I equate to how we have to run these businesses. The competition is still out there despite the lack of workforce, and we got to be on our game. And being on your game is having that hustle. And we all interpret that differently, and different things work for different people. You just got to find out what works for you, what keeps your business thriving, moving forward, growing, setting up your future. Part of that hustle is, 10 years, 15 years from now, I want a retirement. I don't want to be in day-to-day mode where my retirement's not in place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about that balance. It's a work ethic and it's a personality, like we said earlier. So.
And it's not easy. It's a lot easier said than done.
Absolutely. Well, another word you used was grit, about overcoming obstacles. Um, and I think it's interesting to notice that this isn't easy. You know, owning a small business, especially a small woodworking business in today's economy and in any economy, is not an easy job. So did you want to share a little bit more about that, you know, how you deal with overcoming that mental game?
Right. So it is a big mental game. I feel like my mind quits before my body. So I think, it's kind of when you're hit with obstacles, it's your perspective and how you look at it and how you're going to handle it. And I am no pro by this by any means, but some mornings I just wake up and I simply say to myself, suck it up and dig in. And as crude as that is, that's the reality of it. What's the other option? Stay in bed? Well, we know what happens, the businesses, it can fall apart if you do that. So I continually remind myself why I do what I do, because that can get lost quickly, especially when the obstacles come in. I love building, I love working with my hands, which is why many of us in this industry have gotten into the business and started our business. So there's points when you need that grit because you lose that passion, right? And that passion is what drives us. And I think it's natural to lose that passion. I don't think you should feel bad about it. It happens. It's part of the burnout. But keeping that passion in the background and remembering it is what pushes us through. I firmly believe that. I try to remember, when I'm in a tight situation or I'm dealing with a client obstacle or whatever it may be, a machine breaks down. I try to go to those projects that we really knocked it out of the park. And that's kind of like the fuel that, we've done it before. We can do it again. I'm drained, I think, with the employment, the workforce issue. I think a lot of us are. It's a struggle to get skilled trades in it. And when you have a certain amount of work and you need a certain amount of staff to process that work, and you see that guys are just not clicking in the shop, or they're not showing up, or you're dealing with whatever issues, that could really suck you down mentally very quickly. And that just snowballs, right? Because as a leader, what happens when the leader gets withdrawn and is not in the business. It trickles down to everybody else. So you got to have that grit. You got to just be able to dig in. And once again, a lot easier said than done. But I don't see a lot of us talking about this. I don't think we're talking about the challenges that we face, whether we're in the shop or when we go home. I know when I go home, I'm still in the shop half the time. And we know that's not always good, because then you're not around your family. You might be there, but you're not present. So need to balance it. You've heard the expression, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. Well, I've complicated the business here. We work across 3 different materials, that being wood, metal, and plastics. And it complicates our business. It makes it difficult for the workforce, because when you're bringing on employees, you generally find somebody that's all in wood, all in metal, maybe all in plastic. You don't find them across that. So, I chose that. That was my decision. And, that's when I go back and I say, look at the projects we did and why we do it. And I just remind myself, this is why we're in this business. Our clients, counting on us. We have a lot of repeat business. I got to keep all that in mind. Balance it with the grit, balance it with the hustle. Sure, I do ask myself, why did I complicate this business? I ask that, and I just say, why don't I go to one material, stick with that? But part of that complication is what I want to do for me, what I want to see the business to do. And if you're not doing what you want to do, then what's all the sacrifice for? So there's got to be some basics that are in place, some fundamentals of what you believe in, why you're in business, and why you're going to continue. And it's just I'm always looking at other businesses to see what they're doing to overcome the obstacles to do the life work balance. The book, you can read books till you're blue in the face. And I've read a lot of books, and I always seem to come back to the same thing. You got to listen to what your gut is telling you. And it really comes down to that.
Well, speaking of reading, you said you read somewhere that people don't believe in plan B. That plan A should always work and make it work, Well, but you don't agree with that. And did you want to explain your philosophy on that?
Yeah, so I was kind of taken back when I read that. I'm not sure exactly what publication or book it was in, but they basically didn't believe in a plan B, that you should make plan A. They didn't believe in plan B, you should make plan A work. And well, sometimes you got to switch to plan B, and it wasn't your fault. It was a client curveball. And I always kind of have that plan B in the back of my head if I see things that possibly are going to come up. And it's not like I put too much thought into it. I try to avoid that blindsided surprise if it comes up. And I was already thinking about that. You've probably experienced this in the past, but you show up to the job site and all of a sudden, the client wants the cabinets not on this wall, but another wall. And you have prints and everything showing this. Well, there's two ways to go about that, right? One is throw your hands up in the air and leave, not part of the solution, or figure out a solution. Regroup, tell the client that I don't know the answer right now, but I'm going to work on it. Clients want to see you focusing on the solution. It makes them feel better, puts them at ease. The minute you focus on the problem, it goes south for you, it goes south for them. So we tell everybody, and this is part of the interview process as well. How do you focus on solutions? The problem's not going to go away, so we always focus on solutions, and that's where the plan B is. I saw a hiccup on a job we're on right now, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, I need to do a few things just to kind of get it staged. And sure enough, now we're stuck with somebody else's task. And it wasn't a surprise to me. Yeah, it threw a kink in my schedule. Absolutely. It threw a kink in the shop schedule, but I already kind of had the wheels in motion on how I was going to approach it.
Good. Well, you talked about curveballs, and I think the next slide is a real world example of a curveball you were thrown. And you talk about doing things that other people don't want to do, and with a sense of joy and purpose. Tell us the story. So
we were at one of our regular clients, the Heard Museum here in Phoenix. And the exhibit was being done mostly by the museum staff, but they had called upon us because they were running behind schedule. And they just wanted us to do a few things here and there. So it was a time and material situation. And I showed up with my team early in the morning, and we started just tackling some of the tasks. And then my team left around 4 or 5 o'clock, and I said I would stay behind and I would just continue helping the museum and get miscellaneous things done. And it was not heavy work, just a lot of mounting of fixtures and various things. And there was some talk throughout the day that a glass door was supposed to be installed. The contractor that was doing it did not do it. Actually, they had a falling out with the client and they just left. And I kind of felt like this might come my way. It was just a feeling I had. So with no exaggeration, at 11 o'clock at night, I'm still there and I'm working. And the museum director and exhibit designer come to me and say, how can we get a door into this opening? And I said, well, let's look for maybe some 24-hour Home Depots or something like that and see if we can get a door. Mind you, it was a 3080 door. 8-foot doors are not nearly as popular as 6'8" doors, so I didn't know where I was going to get it. There was no Home Depot 24 hours here in Phoenix. So I said, well, we'll have to wait till the morning. I'll go to my door supply, which was luckily right around the corner from our shop. I'll see what I can get. So I walk into the door supply and, I'm hoping I can get a pre-hung 3080 door. That's not happening. No surprise, it's not a standard size door. They had all the parts. So I got all the parts. We showed up on site. We had a mortise in the hinges, in both the door and the jamb. We had a mortise and drill for the locks. That's everything. It ended up, we got the door installed, hung, plumb, level, everything on time. The museum got it painted literally minutes before they had their walkthrough, because the walkthrough was being done by one of the one of the beneficiaries of the exhibit. So everything has to be in place. It has to look 100% complete. So why did I do this? Well, one, they're a good client. Two, they count on us to get things done. It's that simple. They've told that us, before in past projects. Three, it builds more credibility for us. They know they could call upon us. Other guys would have said no, and I get that. It's it's coming, going into your personal life, and you're maybe not seeing your wife or your husband, or you're not seeing your kids because you're at the museum at 11 o'clock. But I always feel like I'm in building mode for the business, and I chose that over family in that particular instance, and it definitely brought more credibility to us. More, they know they could rely on us. I wish it would have happened that way, but it did. And they call upon us still today. We're their primary fabricator if it's not done in-house. And I think it's those little moments that build that credibility. It doesn't have to be a big project. It just needs to be sometimes when you show up in their worst time. And we've all been there, right? We've all been under the gun in our shop where we're running behind, and sometimes you're short on material, and your material supply stays late, so you can get that extra sheet of material or whatever. It's the same thing for them. That's the way I build this business. I try not to stress out the team. I try not to stress out myself in doing that, but once in a while we have to show up, and we have to do it properly. We have to work hard. We have to work smart.
I think that's a great example of both the hustle and the grit, and just going above and beyond what you were obligated to do. It's a big difference.
Yeah, we could have simply said no, and they could have understood. It could have been a total understanding, right? That, hey, it's 11 o'clock at night. We can't figure this out and be here the next morning. But I knew it was possible, and I just knew in the long term it was going to pay off exponentially.
Yep. Well, you talked about building your business, and part of that is building your team, which is a hard job these days. Really hard job. So you admit you struggled with the bullets on this slide. Let me just read through them a second. Build and retain a strong team. Have depth in your team members in case people leave, because life happens. Be able to qualify employees quickly, and need to build strong skills.
Yes, so I believe in this slide 100%, but I've struggled with it, and I continue to struggle with it. I grew up in the construction world. And during that time, there was no conversations about company culture. There was no conversations about building a strong team, cultivating your employees, etc. Everything that we're trying to talk about today, right? There was always a level of respect. Don't get me wrong. I worked with some really talented people, but you showed up, you worked hard, you learned new skills. Gradually, you received more responsibility as a result of it, and that was it. It wasn't to the degree that it is today or needs to be today. And in today's world, that mindset's not enough. And I try to get myself out of that mindset and try to focus on building the team, having team meetings, having team outings, trying to understand where my employees are, both in their personal life and in their business life. Trying to put flexibility out there, perks, communication. I try not to dig into personal lives too much. I think you kind of overstep your bounds sometimes there. So just when permitted. that's a juggling act, and I think I'm getting better at it. I don't know if I'm at where I need to be, but I definitely need to keep on growing on that one.
Well, you mentioned cross-training too, the having depth in your team members and, and for that, if you step out, if you want to go on vacation,
Exactly. For those 1 to 3 man shops out there, what it's like when you don't cross train and the business revolves around you. I don't want the business to revolve around me because you can't go on vacation, you can't get sick without things falling apart. And when things fall apart, as you know, you just you gotta be back in there. So we try to cross train as much as possible. A lot of the people we hire don't have CNC experience. So that's one of the things I try to get them operating on first before programming. And long term, when you're thinking about not only vacations, but what about when you go to sell your business? If you have some potential buyers and they see that the business revolves completely around you, well, they're not going to be interested because they're going to know eventually you're going to be gone and this business is going to fall apart. So there's multiple reasons why to cross train. If you want to have a legacy, you have to cross train. There has to be other people to carry out what you're doing, to keep things going, keep your clients happy, keep the quality up. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. It doesn't happen overnight. And you gotta keep at it. You have to have a plan for it because you don't want to shock the shop into training, right? You don't want to put too much on them. You don't want to put too little. You gotta figure out the right amount. And there never seems to be the right time to train, right? We're always buried in these projects, but even if you just stick a couple hours here and a couple hours there, I think that makes all the difference. Employees see that you're interested in furthering their skill set. Most employees that you want to hire want to grow, want to learn. Every business is different on how you approach this in your business model, but I think the training has to continue in some way.
Mm-hmm. You talked about qualifying employees. What does your hiring process look like?
So we get potential employees from a couple sources. Lately, it's usually been Craigslist and Indeed, and we put out job descriptions out there, and we make them detailed as possible. Trying to set expectations, exceed setting expectations, do whatever you can to maximize that because it kind of sets the tone. And sometimes you need those expectations in place for some fallout. But what we start with is a phone interview. We have a list of questions for the phone interview. If we feel that we like them on the phone interview, then we bring them in for an in-person interview. And we usually have 3 to 4 of us do interviews. We also do a written shop test, which we got from Paul at Downs, I think it was. We took his shop test, incorporated that. We do a build test. I just recently found out from our insurance company that we moved to probably about a year ago that I can have non-employees come into the shop, use our equipment, and they are covered. They weren't covered with our previous company, which is why we never did it. So we do an in-person, in the shop test. We all have them build basically a 5-sided box that gets trimmed out, some miter folding. Not too detailed, it usually 3 hours, but you get a real good idea of how they use tools, how they build, their process, how they go about it. It's real eye-opening, and that could be good or bad. That's on the front end. We ask a lot of questions. I have them do self-interviews where I have them answer questions to their skill levels on various tools, various techniques. And the reason we just have them answer themselves on a piece of paper is because it just takes too long to do it verbally. And that kind of sets the tone. Just to give you an idea, we recently had somebody come in and they put expert down for joiner. Okay, expert. So and this is on the sheet, but we define expert as no supervision needed, can train others. That's the definition for expert. Well, despite them putting that down, we always watch them use the machines on the first go. This particular person by no means was an expert. We had to show him how to use the machine. Unfortunately, we had to let him go after about 2 weeks. It was just one of those situations where he said he was self-taught and he thought he knew a lot, but when it really came down to it, he didn't. So that's why we ask those questions, is because we're setting that expectation. Okay, you put expert, we're expecting expert level from you. And we try to be as clear as possible. We're always updating these sheets to if there's something missing or something we catch on the last interview, just to be as clear as possible. So when potential employees look at this, it's not vague, it's not misleading. It's clear to them as it can be.
And then once they're hired, you do reviews, and I like the way you do this. Do you want to talk about how it's on your core values, and whether they meet those needs?
Right. So not the last time, the second to last time AWFS was in Las Vegas. I attended the EOS class, and it was basically looking at your employees from a core values perspective. We have the 5 company core values, and you judge, and obviously the core values vary from company to company, but you judge the employee based on those core values, and it's either a plus, minus, a minus, and some of you might already be familiar with this, but we look at that first, as opposed to 5 to 10 years ago, we would have looked at, okay, how are they doing this miter joint, or how are they working on the miter saw, whatever it may be. That's all important. We do not forget about that, but we don't look at that first. Now we're looking at the core values. We're scoring them on the core values. And then we look at, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And as the EOS system will tell you, there's either a yes or no to those. There's nothing in the middle. And usually if one of those is, so if they get it or want it, if they get it or want it, if the answer is no, they're usually not a good fit for the company. Capacity to do it, if the answer is no, we feel like we could work on that. There's some room to grow there. And you know what? It's made it, I've always struggled with critiquing. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to judge somebody on their skill set improperly and be wrong about that. A job is at stake. But this new process, I'm not going to say it's cut and dry, but it makes it much easier, and it makes the definition much clearer. And you don't have to be the only one doing this. You could do this amongst, a shop lead or an office person, and you can compare results and see where you're at. But I could tell you, the critiquing, the reviewing process is not as stressful as it used to be.
It helps to have structure for that too. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay, the next slide is about sales. And I think what you talk about, the machines mean nothing without work, clients, and sales. And as an owner, you're going to have to sell. It's just part of the job. You can't give that up. And I think talking about the machines a little bit more, talk about how how it's important to focus on building the business and not buying more machines.
So when I first started the business 16 years ago, as being a hands-on person, we all like tools, right? We like buying them. We like using them. It's just the nature. It's why we're in this business. And when I started the business, I was always concerned about, do I have the right equipment? Is it set up properly? Do I have the right floor space? When we started out of our garage in 2004, and it's a 2-car garage, And that only lasts for so long. So we went into a bigger space. Okay, now we got the biggest space, right? Okay, now we got to buy more machines to fill that space. It's a vicious cycle. It never ends. Well, if I was to start that all over again, I would take the completely opposite approach. Sales would be my priority. Machines would come second. And don't get me wrong, I do not enjoy sales. I did not go into this business for being a salesperson. And yes, you have to have equipment to produce. You can't just go out there and sell, and not have no equipment on the back end. But if there are no sales in place, the greatest equipment in the world means nothing because it's not doing anything for you. So that would be something that I would tell somebody that's just entering any business is the sales are key. You have to focus on that if you want to build a consistent profit generating client base. It's that simple. Your tools are great to expand your capabilities, but they don't bring in the clients initially. They don't. You can give shop tours eventually, and potential clients can see your capabilities. But when you're on that front end, you really got to get the sales. I dread doing sales. So several years ago, I tried to hire salespeople. We hired several, not all at once, but one after another, and it just didn't work out. It's difficult to manage the base salary with the commission salary, and people are kind of all over the board on where they want to be on that. And so as a result of it not working out, at that time I had an advisory board of 3 members. They were all previous and current business owners. They had no vested interest in our company. So there was no financial or emotional attachment to CK Valenti. And they basically said, you have to sell, Chris. And I said, well, I don't like doing sales. I'm not good at it. I don't like that cold call. I feel like a junk car used salesman. I just don't have a good feeling about it in general. And they said, well, don't try to sell them anything. Just build relationships. And I said, okay, let's talk about this more. And, just meet them, see what they need, see what their business is about, briefly tell them about your capabilities and walk away. And I started to do that and I got more comfortable about it. And, it was actually a good time to do market research. Ask them questions like, what problems are you having? As opposed to, what can I sell you now? Or I'm running a deal, or, we're doing this project now. And I omitted all of that. Didn't try to get any sales on any of those meetings. And it was a much more comfortable meeting in person. It was more, no tension involved because you're walking away knowing that nothing may come out of it, as opposed to walking away and hoping that, boy, I get a sale on this one. So it was more about building relationships, understanding what their problems are, where their difficulties are, and you take that data and use it on how to improve your business. And that just worked out so much better. And I haven't done sales now I haven't had any meetings in the past few years, and that's probably bad because we've just been so busy and with COVID and everything. But the repeat business has been heavy, the referral has been heavy, and I just feel like when you just show your true side and you take that whole sales angle out of it, people appreciate you more. They talk to you more. They remember you. And which all leads to them more likely calling you in 6 months, a year down the road.
I like that you said it's about building relationships and it's not just about getting the next sale, because that is what it's about. That's the heart of sales.
Exactly. Yep.
Operating structure. So the second bullet there, I think, is really important, and we need to focus on that, about working on the business versus being in the business. And you can go over some of your the way your operating structure is set up and everything, but that I think we need to not lose that sight of that. So Go ahead and
Right.
explain. Yeah.
I think everybody approaches this one from all different angles. I'm an engineer by trade. So naturally for me, I just need structures in place, whether it be on the shop side or whether it be on the office side. So these areas, uh, I basically broke the business up into 9 buckets, and none of these are revolutionary. I'm sure many companies out here have the same exact thing, but those 9 buckets are management, leadership, sales, marketing, and advertising, operations and manufacturing, accounting, finance, procurement, HR, legal, R&D, and then there's facilities. And I literally have folders on my computer that are set up in this fashion. And I also have a dashboard on Trello that's divided up in this way. And it just kind of gives me that big picture look on what's going on in each of those areas. Now, ultimately, sure, I'd love to have an employee for each of those departments, but we know that's not practical, especially for the small business, right? So you have to take some of them on. Well, having that structure is how I manage the various things that are going on in there. And I can go on to Trello and say, okay, this is what's going on here. And this is what's going on here. And it lets me keep tabs. Now I try to delegate a lot of that to our office manager, or if there's shop improvements that have to be done, so there's some of the shop floor. But I feel like for me, that structure kind of keeps me in check. And when you're wearing multiple hats, you need quick, efficient tools. You need to be able to look at things quickly and know what's going on and not have to dig for this data. And that's how I do it. The level at which we use these areas differs. Like I'm barely in the facilities bucket. Facilities is, okay, we need a new compressor, or the compressor needs new air lines or something like that. I am in the operations bucket a lot. We're looking at, that's where we keep a lot of client information. So I'm looking at that quite a bit. I keep my manufacturing times in there and stuff like that. And this is basically, like I said, folders on the PC, and it might just be different Excel sheets. I do use Google Drive to track certain things that are related to sales or profits. That's what works for me. I know the EOS system does something similar. It does try to create a structure for you to operate in, but I know, we get so buried in the day to day, and when you do, you need that more than ever, because if you have to dig for material or, scrap, you have scrap notes laying all over the place and they're scattered. It just creates chaos. When you have chaos, you start to dislike the business. I don't want to dislike my business. So for me, I have to keep it organized. Otherwise, it just spirals down from there.
That makes sense. But now how many employees did you say you had?
Right now, we are at 6.
Okay. Okay. So that's good, because I think some of the people are going to say, oh, it's just me. I don't need to have all this structure. And how would you respond to something like that?
I would agree. I would say you're absolutely right, because I would say you don't have to cover all those areas, but in the very beginning, you're going to have to, because you can't hire a team to do that. But let's say you hire a team to take over many of those buckets. Well, you need to know how those buckets have to operate properly in order to review the staff properly. Because if you don't, how do you measure them? If you can't measure it, you can't make adjustments. And you have to be able to adjust. And so that's kind of why, I feel like, yeah, I need to know how all these aspects of the business are functioning. I can't just assume, Joe Smith's going to come in, take over, and run it properly without any of my interaction. You got to keep your finger on the pulse. And ultimately, you want to be able to stand back and let them do their job, but you still got to have those weekly checkups. And I feel like you take the information and the data that has worked for you in the past and you apply it going forward. They might have different methods. That's fine. But all of a sudden, if your profit takes a hit or your cogs go up or whatever happens, you got to be able to dig in there and look and see what's going on. And if you can't look at that data because you decided that, the P&L statement wasn't important to you and you were going to hand it off, that could spiral out of control very quickly.
For sure. I like that you said you can't fix it, you can't measure. I think that's very important to focus on that. But then also trying to manage your time and keep a balance between this working on the business versus being in the business. It's hard to do.
It's a tough balance. It's not easy. And right now we're overbooked and I'm in the business a lot. I'm not on the business as much as I'd like to be. I've always felt that when a client writes you a check, that's priority one, because you've made a commitment to them and they're relying on that commitment. They're relying on you to, show up and install something, whatever that may be. And you can say, well, I need to grow my business, and that's a valid, statement, but you have to juggle it. And I don't know if there's a right answer to that. I think it's more of a matter of what works for you while maintaining all that. And it's a constant struggle. And then when personal items inject on that, right? And you're trying to get that balance as well. It's just, there's a lot of forces that keep you from working on the business versus working in the business. And it's, it requires a lot of discipline. And I'm guilty of not having that discipline all the time. Right now I'm the only one that can program the CNC and run the CNC at our shop. Well, if the CNC doesn't make parts, that means parts don't go to the assembly bench and it just flows down from there, right? It's a bottleneck. We're trying to bring up one of our craftsmen to run the CNC. And then to complicate things, we have a much older CNC. So it's not intuitive like today's machines. So that adds another level of complexity. But this presentation is a good example. I wanted to do this presentation, and it came down to the wire to prepare for the materials. But you have to say to yourself, I just need to make time for this, because if you keep on saying, well, I can't work on the business now, I'll do it next week, and then next week comes and then I'll do it next week, that just snowballs out of control. And then before you know it, you're a year past that initial time and you didn't grow where you were supposed to grow because you didn't take those little chunks of time and spend it on the business. So I would love to know what others are doing to figure out that balance. With the growth, we are able to hire some more people, and it does get better to balance, but at the same time, you're building a team. So, it doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Good advice for sure. So cash flow, this is always a sensitive topic for some people, and it's all managed. Everyone manages a little bit differently, but do you want to go into some of the details about how you manage your cash flow?
So for a guy that likes to buy tools, this wasn't an easy one, but I've gotten a lot better at it. We did fund the business organically, without a doubt. We put a lot of personal money into it. We do still owe some of that money back. We paid a lot of it back, but we ran up a lot of credit cards. About until a year ago, we were carrying 3 to 4 credit cards that were closely maxed out. Needless to say, this was a cloud over my head, over my wife's head, that just was very stressful. We were fortunate enough to pivot during the pandemic, and the profits from our barrier business eliminated all our credit card debt. And that was a decent chunk. It was probably, $50,000 to $60,000. It was a good amount of money. There was times where I was late on Amex bills, and I don't know if you know about Amex, but they take your interest rate from 11% to 19 to 20% for being late on one payment, despite a heavy payment history where we would pay chunks off at a time. Huge lesson learned there. To date, we don't have any money on those credit cards, and that's how I'm going to keep it. I do keep the credit cards open just for emergency. If I have to put money on credit cards, it's going to be a dire situation. Luckily, I feel like we're far from that. We do have a credit line that's roughly at about 8% that we keep with our bank. And, that's easy draws, just transfers on the in our checking account. And we use that for, when we have to float more than we normally do, payroll or whatever it may be. But we try to pay that off as quickly as possible as well. Deposits, deposits are a tricky thing, right? And many of you out there with commercial clients know that sometimes you got to float your clients 30 to 90 days, and this gets painful quick. I haven't really been in that position over the last 15 to 16 years, maybe less than a handful of times. We've been able to get 50% deposits in most cases, including our commercial clients. We state that on the front end. They don't all do that, but they will do progress payments, which is much better than doing a 30 to 90 day after your project is completed. We're in one of those projects right now where we're doing progress payments, and we bill on like the 20th of the month, and we see a check probably 2 to 3 weeks later. So that's working, but I know some of you out there can't do that, and that's difficult. That can sink a company very quickly if one of those clients that's holding you out 30 to 90 days decides to default on you. I was just having this conversation with another shop nearby, but my mindset on 50% deposits with residential clients is that if you're not in a position to give me 50% now, you're not going to be in a position to pay the amount in full. With commercial clients, like I said, it's a juggling act, but at the end of the day, we're not a bank. It's that simple. So that's kind of my take on that.
And I do think we've talked to before about communicating with your vendors is just as important as with your clients, to build the credit and establish the relationship just as it is with sales.
Exactly. I know a lot of shops out there want to just pay cash up front, and I get it, and I think that's great. But if you're in a position where you are dealing with vendors, I think you should open that line of credit just to build the credit itself, even if you're paying off right away, because you might grow, you might get to that point where you do need that 30 days. We use that 30 days with a handful of our vendors, especially the larger, like our sheet goods supplier, where we're spending a lot of money. And if I'm going to be late, I call up that vendor and I just say, here's the situation. Totally intend to pay you, but we have a hiccup. And 9 out of 10 times, they're all understanding. They might hit you with a finance charge, which is like 1%, nothing like if it was a credit card. But they're all understanding. I've never had one fall out on us because they know you've been around for a long time and they know you're going to follow up with it. There's no guarantees, yes, but you kind of look at the odds of it. And like I said, the communication is big. Just don't hide from them. Call them up and say, hey, I'm going to be late. And they appreciate that. And they remember that too. And I think you got to build that credit though, because if you pay cash on the front end, and that's great, you're not carrying any debt. But when you get to that point where you might need that 30 days, you don't know if they're going to say, well, you've been paying cash and it's okay. We're going to give. You have to fill out that credit app. You have to get approved. They have to call your other vendors. That's the other thing, right? When your local vendor, these vendors call each other and they say, hey, how's CK Valenti doing with your line of credit? You want to have a history there. At least have it established. It's kind of like my thought behind the credit cards. I don't have any amounts on them, but I keep them open just in case. the creditors don't like to see no credit cards at all, right? When you pull your credit score, it's like it's same as business as it is personal, but they want to see that you have available credit. So I feel it's the same methodology with the vendors.
Okay, great, good. And last slide, but not the least, probably the most important is support to finding a community like the CMA to get outside your shop and see what other shops are doing.
Yes, without a doubt. I'm definitely guilty of staying in my little world and trying to work out issues on my own. Not only is that difficult, it's stressful, right? Because you're trying to figure it out on your own and you got no support. So a group like the CMA, where you put a question on the forum and you get 5 different answers. I mean, that's worth its weight in gold. And I've been doing that now for the last 14 years. I think it's, you can't even, the cost is so minute to the value that you receive. Because here's the thing, and this is very key. What you're trying to accomplish, somebody has already done. We're not reinventing the wheel. You shouldn't be trying to reinvent the wheel. At least 2 or 3 guys have been out there that have already done this already, have the answers. So why not just go out there and have somebody advise you on it? That's part of working smart, right? Is bringing in the CMA to help you with these issues. And don't underestimate the power of external perspective. You're in your business, you have emotional and financial attachments to it. Your thought process can be skewed. Get somebody who has no financial or emotional attachment to it. They don't care. I don't mean that in the bad way. It's just that they're gonna give you the honest opinion, good or bad. And that's what we did with our advisory board, right? It was just 3 guys that here's the truth, whether you like it or not. And I can't emphasize how imperative that is for growing a business, not just maintaining your day to day, because they've been there, they've done it. Like I said, don't reinvent the wheel.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words about the CMA, and I appreciate your time today, Chris. Really appreciate you sharing what you have learned over the years, and hopefully others of you on the call today are able to glean some knowledge from what he shared.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you having us. This is, something for growing our business as well as talking about these things. I'm always open to talk about this. You can email me, you can call the office. I'm more than happy to talk about it more. I feel like I learned that way as well. And I think we got to keep these conversations open and current.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.